At Christmas, my brother laughed. Still unemployed? I smiled and said just one thing. It's funny how people assume silence means failure. I used to think Tuesday mornings were safe. You know how some people avoid flying on Friday the 13th or won't walk under ladders. I thought Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. were my safe space. The kind of ordinary moment where nothing earth-shattering happens. Where you grab your second cup of coffee, check your emails, and settle into another predictable day at Chicago Tech Solutions. I was wrong. Jasmine, could you join us in conference room B? Sarah from HR wasn't making eye contact. That should have been my first clue. But I was too busy mentally rehearsing my presentation for the afternoon client meeting, the one I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting. The one that was supposed to showcase our team's innovative approach to user experience design. Conference room B smelled like stale coffee and defeat. 3 people sat around the mahogany table. Sarah, my manager Kevin, and some executive I'd seen in the elevator but never actually met. A manila folder sat in front of each of them, like they were holding court. "Please have a seat," Kevin said, gesturing to the chair across from them. I sat down, smoothing my navy blazer. The one I'd splurged on at Nordstrom, because Malik always said presentation was everything in corporate America. The irony wasn't lost on me later. Due to recent budget restructuring and strategic realignment, the words blurred together. Restructuring, downsizing, economic pressures. I caught fragments. Valued team member, difficult decision, not a reflection of your performance. But what I heard loudest was the silence between their words. The space where my career used to live. "Your last day will be Friday," Sarah concluded, sliding a packet across the table. "Severance details are included. Security will escort you to collect your personal items." I stared at the packet. My name was spelled wrong on the label. 5 years at this company, and they couldn't spell Jasmine correctly. It said Jasmine in bold, official letters. "Any questions?" Kevin asked. I had a million questions. Like why they kept Marcus, who spent half his day playing fantasy football. Or why this budget restructuring somehow only affected the 3 Black employees in our department. Or why they were cutting the person who'd increased user engagement by 37% last quarter. Instead, I said, no questions. Because what was the point? In corporate America, especially in tech, questioning the decision just makes you look bitter. Difficult. One of those employees who can't take feedback or isn't a culture fit. I'd watched it happen to others. The whispered conversations. The way your name becomes synonymous with problematic. So I signed the papers, shook their hands, and walked back to my desk with Sarah trailing behind me like a funeral director. My coworkers pretended to be busy. Keyboards clicked a little too loudly. Phone conversations became suddenly urgent. Only Priya from accounting looked up and mouthed, "I'm sorry," when Sarah wasn't looking. I packed my plants first. The small succulent I'd named Survivor because it had lived through 2 office relocations and a week when I forgot to water it. The snake plant my mom gave me on my first day, promising it would bring good luck. I wrapped them carefully in paper towels, creating little cocoons for the drive home. My personal photos went next. The one of me and my college roommates at graduation. The picture from last year's company retreat where I actually looked happy, standing next to our team's award for innovation and user experience. I wondered if they'd take that award back too. The security guard, a kind older man named Frank who always asked about my weekend plans, stood nearby, trying to look official but mostly just looking uncomfortable. "This is garbage, Jasmine," he whispered when Sarah stepped away to make a phone call. "You're one of the good ones here." One of the good ones. Even kindness came wrapped in microaggressions. I saved my laptop files to a flash drive, deleted my browser history, and logged out of everything for the last time. 5 years of work relationships, inside jokes, and small victories reduced to a cardboard box and a security escort. The elevator ride down felt eternal. Frank kept apologizing. Sarah kept checking her phone. I kept staring at my reflection in the polished steel doors, wondering when I'd started looking so tired. Outside, Chicago's October wind cut through my blazer like a warning. The city looked the same, busy pedestrians, honking cars, the familiar smell of hot dogs from the corner vendor. But everything felt different when you were suddenly unemployed at 11:43 a.m. on a Tuesday. I sat in my Honda Civic for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, before I could bring myself to start the engine. The radio played some upbeat pop song about resilience and rising above. I turned it off. The drive back to my studio apartment in Logan Square was a blur of construction traffic and self-doubt. I'd moved to this neighborhood because it felt creative and hopeful. Young professionals and artists sharing the same coffee shops, the same dreams of making it in a big city. Now, it just felt expensive. My apartment, all 600 square feet of it, welcomed me with dirty dishes and an unmade bed. I set the box down on my kitchen counter and just stared at it. This was my career now. A cardboard box. I should have called someone. My mom in Atlanta would have said all the right things about doors closing and windows opening. My college friends would have offered to send my resume to their networks. But I couldn't bear the conversations yet. The careful way people would ask what happened, as if losing your job was somehow contagious. The way they'd reassure me that everything happens for a reason, as if racism and corporate greed were part of some divine plan. Instead, I did what I always did when the world felt too heavy. I ran a bath, lit my favorite vanilla candle, and sank into water hot enough to sting. The burn scars on my left arm, souvenirs from a kitchen accident in college, turned pink under the heat. I traced them with my finger, remembering what my therapist always said. Scars mean you survived something. As I lay there, letting the water wash away the humiliation of the morning, something shifted. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was finally being alone with my thoughts instead of performing confidence for conference rooms full of people who'd never really seen me anyway. I started thinking about all the times I'd bitten my tongue in meetings, all the brilliant ideas I'd softened to make other people comfortable, all the ways I'd shrunk myself to fit into spaces that were never really built for women who looked like me. What if losing this job wasn't the end of something? What if it was permission to begin? I thought about my friend Keisha, who'd been struggling to find affordable therapy after her promotion stress sent her to the emergency room with panic attacks. About my cousin Nia, who worked 80-hour weeks at a law firm and hadn't taken a real vacation in 3 years. About all the brilliant Black women I knew who were drowning in careers that demanded everything and gave back anxiety, imposter syndrome, and burnout. What if there was something I could build for us? Something that understood the unique pressure of being the only one in the room, the weight of representing your entire race in every meeting, the exhaustion of constantly proving you belong. By the time the water went cold, I had an idea growing in the silence. I just didn't know it would change everything. The next morning, I didn't update my LinkedIn profile or start applying for new jobs. Instead, I opened my laptop and typed 2 words at the top of a blank document: Project Rooted. I didn't tell anyone about the layoff. Not yet. Because some seeds need to grow in darkness before they're ready for sunlight. And I definitely didn't tell my brother Malik, who called me later that week with his usual condescending tone. How's the corporate grind treating you, little sister? Still climbing that ladder. Everything's fine. I lied, staring at my laptop screen where wireframes for a wellness app were taking shape. Everything was fine. It just wasn't the fine anyone expected. Nobody claps for you at 3 a.m. when you're crying over broken code. 3 weeks after the layoff, I sold my dining table. Not because I wanted to. That table had witnessed every milestone of my adult life. Job celebrations, breakup ice cream sessions, the Thanksgiving I was too broke to fly home, and ate turkey sandwiches alone while video calling my family. But Adobe Creative Suite costs $600 a year, and user testing platforms don't accept sentimental attachment as payment. The buyer was a young couple who kept gushing about how rustic and authentic it looked. I wanted to tell them it wasn't rustic by choice. Those scratches came from me working on my laptop during dinner because I couldn't afford a proper desk back then. Instead, I smiled and helped them load it into their Tesla. $600. Enough for 2 months of software subscriptions. My apartment started looking like a minimalist Instagram post, except instead of intentional zen, it was strategic poverty. Couch. Kept because I needed somewhere to code. Bed. Obviously essential. Coffee table. Sold to a hipster who planned to upcycle it. Bookshelf. Sold to a grad student who reminded me of myself 5 years ago. Hungry and optimistic. Each piece of furniture that left took a memory with it, but bought me time to build something that mattered. I established a routine that my therapist, Dr. Patricia Williams, called unsustainable but understandable. Wake up at 5 a.m. Coffee and meditation. Code until noon. Therapy at 1 p.m. on Tuesdays and Fridays. More coding. Ramen dinner while watching YouTube tutorials on React Native. Code until my eyes burned. Sleep. Repeat. You're processing grief, Dr. Williams said during our third session after the layoff. I'd finally told her what happened, though I still couldn't bring myself to use the word unemployed with anyone else. Grief for what? I asked, curled up in her familiar armchair. Her office smelled like lavender and safety. For the version of yourself who believed that working hard and playing by the rules would be enough. She was right, but grief felt too gentle for what I was experiencing. This was rage, channeled into code. Every late night was a middle finger to Kevin from HR. Every design iteration was proof that I didn't need their validation. I was building something called Rooted, a wellness app specifically designed for Black women in high-stress careers. Not the generic mindfulness apps that felt like they were made by and for wealthy white women who had time for hour-long meditation retreats. This was different. Rooted understood that sometimes your meditation happened in a bathroom stall at work because it was the only private space available. It offered 5-minute breathing exercises for before difficult meetings. It had a feature called microaggression recovery with techniques for processing those moments when someone questioned whether you were qualified enough or touched your hair without permission. The color palette was warm browns and deep greens, earthy tones that felt like my grandmother's garden in Atlanta. The language was conversational, like talking to your wisest friend. The guided meditations were led by therapists who understood that just breathe wasn't always enough when you were the only Black person in your department. I conducted user interviews at coffee shops across Chicago, buying strangers lattes in exchange for 30 minutes of brutal honesty about their mental health struggles. I met Keisha, a marketing manager who had panic attacks in her car before big presentations. There's Monica, a software engineer who kept a stress ball hidden in her desk drawer and squeezed it during team meetings. And Destiny, a financial analyst who hadn't taken a sick day in 2 years because she was afraid it would confirm her manager's suspicions that she wasn't committed. Their stories became features. Their pain points became solutions. Their tears, shared over cooling coffee, became the foundation of something bigger. But nobody knew about any of this. My LinkedIn profile still showed me as UX designer at Chicago Tech Solutions. I didn't post updates about my progress or share screenshots of my wireframes. When college friends texted about grabbing drinks, I made excuses. When my mom called asking about work, I gave vague answers about projects. The silence was intentional. I'd watched too many people announce their big dreams on social media, only to abandon them when the dopamine hit of likes wore off and the real work began. I'd seen entrepreneurs who spent more time posting about their startups than actually building them. This was different. This was sacred. But the silence came with a cost. When you're building something alone at 3 a.m., debugging code that should work but doesn't, there's no cheerleading squad. No colleagues to bounce ideas off. No boss to validate your progress. Just you, a laptop screen, and the crushing weight of imposter syndrome whispering that you're not smart enough, not experienced enough, not connected enough to pull this off. I redesigned the user interface 17 times, scrapped entire features, and rebuilt them from scratch. Cried over broken APIs and celebrated when simple functions finally worked. I learned React Native from scratch, watched endless tutorials, and spent my last $20 on a Udemy course about mobile app development. Malik called every few weeks, usually when he was traveling for work and bored in airport lounges. Still job hunting? He'd ask, and I could hear him scrolling through emails while we talked. I told you tech is brutal. Maybe it's time to consider something more stable. Maybe go back to school, get an MBA like normal people. I'm working on some things, I'd say. Like what? Your art therapy phase? Jasmine, you're 32. You can't keep floating around like this. Mom's worried. Mom wasn't worried. I called her every Sunday, and she never once pressured me about employment. But Malik needed to believe everyone shared his disappointment in my choices. I'm not floating, I'd say, looking at my laptop covered in sticky notes with user feedback and feature ideas. Then what are you doing? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're hiding. He wasn't wrong. I was hiding, but not from failure, from premature exposure, from people who would try to shrink my vision to fit their understanding, from investors who would want to change everything that made Rooted special. Some seeds need darkness to grow strong roots. I was building mine underground, one line of code at a time. By December, I had a functioning prototype, 12 beta testers, and exactly $847 left in my savings account. But I also had something I'd never had at Chicago Tech Solutions, the unshakable knowledge that I was building something that mattered, even if nobody knew it yet. He told me I'd never make it without a white co-founder. I smiled and closed my laptop. The text came on a rainy Thursday morning in November. Coffee? Have a proposal that could change everything for you. Brad. Brad Martinez had been my desk neighbor at Chicago Tech Solutions for 2 years. The kind of guy who wore expensive sneakers to Casual Friday and name-dropped Stanford in every conversation, even though he'd only done a summer program there. We'd worked on 3 projects together, and he'd taken credit for 2 of them. But I was curious enough to say yes. We met at Intelligentsia, the trendy coffee shop where startup bros performed networking theater over oat milk lattes. Brad was already there when I arrived, MacBook open, AirPods strategically placed on the table, the universal signal that he was important and busy. Jasmine. He stood up like we were old friends instead of former colleagues who'd barely tolerated each other. You look rested. Translation: unemployed. But I smiled and ordered my coffee, regular coffee, not the $18 artisanal nonsense he was drinking. So, he said, settling back into his chair with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world, I heard through the grapevine that you're working on something interesting. Wellness tech. I hadn't told anyone about Rooted. Not anyone from Chicago Tech. Which meant someone had been watching my GitHub commits or tracking my LinkedIn activity more carefully than I'd realized. Just exploring some ideas, I said carefully. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about. He leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was about to share state secrets. I've been following the wellness space, and the market is absolutely exploding, especially for underserved demographics. Underserved demographics. Like we were a market segment instead of human beings. I'm listening, I said, though every instinct told me to leave. Here's the thing, and I'm telling you this as a friend. You've got great ideas, but you're missing the most important piece. Credibility. I took a sip of my coffee and waited for the punchline. Investors don't just fund apps. They fund teams. And unfortunately, the data shows that single female founders especially, have a much harder time securing funding. Especially Black female founders. He couldn't even say it. But he continued, his eyes lighting up like he was announcing a cure for cancer. I have a solution. My buddy Connor from Stanford just wrapped up his Series A exit. Brilliant guy, really understands user acquisition and scaling. If you brought him on as a co-founder, say 40% equity, I could get you in front of some serious VCs. I set my coffee down slowly. 40% equity. It's standard for technical co-founders, Brad said, missing the irony entirely. Look, Connor's got the network you need. The connections. The credibility that opens doors. And what exactly would Connor contribute, besides his credibility? Strategy, obviously. Fundraising expertise. Maybe some back-end optimization. I know you've been struggling with the technical aspects. I hadn't been struggling. My app ran smoothly, my user testing was thorough, and my code was cleaner than anything Brad had ever written. But in his mind, I was still the Black woman who needed saving. Connor could also help with the business model, Brad continued. Make it more scalable. Less niche. Less Black, you mean? I didn't say that. But his face said everything. I'm just thinking about market penetration. You want this thing to succeed, right? I closed my laptop and stood up. Where are you going? Brad looked genuinely confused. We haven't even talked about my advisor role yet. Your advisor role? Well, yeah. I'd be bringing the deal together. Standard 2% advisory stake. 2% of my company for making an introduction to a Stanford buddy who would take 40% of my company for being white and male. Brad, I said, slinging my bag over my shoulder. I appreciate the offer. Really? But I think I'll figure this out on my own. Jasmine, come on. Don't let pride get in the way of progress. You're never going to get funded as a solo founder in this space. The statistics are based on a system that was never designed for people like me. I finished. Which is exactly why I'm building something different. I walked out while he was still sputtering about market realities and missed opportunities. The rain had stopped, but I felt like I was drowning anyway. Not because Brad's offer was tempting, it wasn't, but because it confirmed everything I'd suspected about how the world saw me. Smart enough to have good ideas, not smart enough to execute them. Creative enough to identify problems, not capable enough to solve them. I walked home in the gray Chicago afternoon, past the glossy startup offices in River North where men like Connor were probably having conversations about disrupting industries they'd never had to navigate as outsiders. That night, I filled 17 pages in my journal. All the rage I couldn't express in that coffee shop poured onto paper. Every microaggression I'd swallowed at Chicago Tech. Every time someone had questioned whether I was technical enough or suggested I'd be better suited for client-facing roles. Every meeting where my ideas were ignored until a man repeated them louder. But writing it down transformed the anger into fuel. I meditated for an hour, focusing on my breath and the feeling of my feet on the ground. Dr. Williams had taught me that anger was just passion with nowhere to go. I was redirecting mine. The next morning, I made a decision. No more stealth mode. No more hiding. I soft-launched Rooted. Not with a big announcement or a press release. Just a simple landing page, an email sign-up, and a message to my beta testers asking them to share it with women who might need it. I posted about it once, quietly, on my personal Instagram. Built something for us. Link in bio. Within 6 hours, I had 50 signups. By the end of the day, 200. By the end of the week, 500. Women were sharing it in group chats, Slack channels, and Facebook groups I'd never heard of. Black women in corporate America, finding each other and sharing a tool that finally understood their specific struggles. No Connor. No Brad. No Stanford network. Just Black women telling other Black women about something that worked. My phone buzzed with messages from strangers. This is exactly what I needed. How did you know? Can I share this with my team? I screenshot every single one and saved them in a folder called Receipts. When Malik called that week, asking his usual questions about my job search, I almost told him. Almost shared the excitement of watching something I'd built spread organically through communities that needed it. Instead, I said, still working on some things. Because some victories are too precious to share before they're strong enough to withstand other people's doubt. And because I was saving the best news for Christmas dinner. Still unemployed? Malik smirked. I let him laugh. That was his favorite hobby. The flight to Atlanta was turbulent, which felt appropriate. I gripped my phone during takeoff, scrolling through the email that had arrived 2 days earlier, the one I'd read so many times I could recite it from memory. Subject: Demo request, Rooted Wellness Platform. Dear Ms. Washington, I hope this message finds you well. I'm reaching out regarding your wellness application, Rooted, which came to our attention through our corporate wellness initiative. The irony was almost too perfect to be real. But I'd checked the sender's email domain 3 times. It was legitimate. I'd packed light for the trip, just to carry on with my thrifted Christmas dress, a deep green vintage piece I'd found for $12, my laptop, and enough confidence to last 3 days in my childhood home. Mom picked me up from Hartsfield-Jackson in her familiar Honda, the same car she'd been driving since I graduated college. She looked exactly the same, silver-streaked hair in a neat bun, reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain, that warm smile that could heal wounds I didn't know I had. You look thin, she said, which was Southern Mom for I love you, and I'm worried. I look focused, I corrected, settling into the passenger seat that still smelled like the vanilla air freshener she'd been buying for 20 years. She gave me that look that said she knew I was holding something back, but she'd wait for me to share it when I was ready. Malik flew in this morning. He's at the house now, showing Grandma something on his phone about cryptocurrency.
Of course he was.
The house hadn't changed since high school. Same brick exterior, same azalea bushes flanking the front porch, same wooden swing where I'd spent summer evenings reading and dreaming about escaping to bigger cities. But walking through the front door felt different now, like I was returning as someone new. Baby girl. Grandma Rose wrapped me in the kind of hug that reset your entire nervous system. She smelled like coconut oil and wisdom, her silver hair styled in the same elegant crown I'd admired my entire life. Hey, Grandma. Malik's been telling us all about his important business deals, she whispered conspiratorially. But I want to hear about what you've been up to. Your mama says you're working on something special. I glanced toward the living room where I could hear Malik's voice explaining something in the patronizing tone he reserved for family members he considered financially illiterate. I'll tell you later, I promised. Christmas Eve dinner was a production. Mom had spent 2 days cooking, honey-glazed ham, mac and cheese that should win awards, collard greens simmered with smoked turkey, cornbread that crumbled perfectly, and sweet potato pie that made angels weep. The dining room table groaned under the weight of enough food to feed twice as many people because that's how Southern mothers show love. Malik held court from his usual spot, wearing a crisp white button-down that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. His Rolex caught the light every time he gestured, which was often. He'd been talking for 15 minutes straight about some acquisition his firm had just completed. The beauty of venture capital, he said, cutting into his ham with surgical precision, is that you're not just investing money. You're providing expertise, mentorship. Most of these entrepreneurs have good ideas, but no clue how to scale. Dad nodded politely while scrolling through football scores on his phone. Mom made encouraging sounds while refilling everyone's glasses. Grandma Rose watched Malik with the patient expression of someone who'd raised 12 children and seen every type of peacocking imaginable. Take this one founder we're working with, Malik continued. Brilliant technical mind, but zero business sense. We had to completely restructure his equity model, bring in a real CEO. Sometimes you have to save people from themselves. I pushed collard greens around my plate and said nothing. Speaking of business, Malik said, turning his attention to me with a predatory smile of someone about to enjoy themselves. How's the job hunt going, little sister? Still networking your way through Chicago's tech scene. The table went quiet. Even Dad looked up from his phone. I took a slow sip of sweet tea, feeling everyone's eyes on me. This was the moment I'd been anticipating and dreading in equal measure. Actually, I said, setting down my glass carefully, I haven't been job hunting. Malik's eyebrows shot up. Oh, really? Finally ready to admit that maybe tech isn't the right fit? I've been telling you for years that you're too sensitive for that industry. No, I mean I haven't been job hunting because I've been building my own company. The silence stretched like taffy. Malik's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Your own company? Mom leaned forward, pride and concern battling across her features. What kind of company? Dad asked. I looked directly at Malik, whose expression had shifted from smugness to skepticism. A wellness app for Black women in high-stress careers. It's called Rooted. That's nice, Malik said with the tone people use when discussing children's art projects. But Jasmine, having an idea isn't the same as having a business. Do you have funding? Revenue? Users? I have all three. Another silence. How much funding? Malik pressed. None. He laughed, actually laughed. Jasmine, you can't bootstrap a tech company in 2024. You need investors, advisors, people who understand how to scale. You can't just. Your CEO requested a demo. The words hung in the air like a record scratch. Malik's laugh died in his throat. What? Your CEO. At Peterson Ventures. Amanda Chun. She requested a demo of Rooted for next month. Malik's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been fear. That's impossible. Amanda doesn't take unsolicited meetings. How would you even? Through your firm's wellness initiative. Apparently, Rooted has been making waves in corporate wellness circles. Grandma Rose clapped her hands together. Now what does that mean, baby? Is that good? I smiled at her, then looked back at Malik, who was staring at me like I'd started speaking another language. It means, I said, reaching for another piece of cornbread, that sometimes the best business strategy is actually solving real problems for real people. For the first time in my adult life, my older brother had absolutely nothing to say. And the sweet potato pie had never tasted so good. Rooted wasn't just a project. It was a reckoning. 2 weeks before Christmas, I was debugging a notification feature when my phone buzzed with an email that would change everything. Subject: Wellness Platform Inquiry, Peterson Ventures. My finger hovered over the notification for a full 30 seconds before I opened it. Peterson Ventures. Malik's firm. The same company where he spent board meetings explaining why diversity initiatives were noble, but not profitable. Dear Jasmine Washington, my name is Dr. Keiko Tanaka, and I lead the Wellness and Mental Health Initiative here at Peterson Ventures. I came across your application Rooted through a recommendation from Dr. Aisha Williams, a DI consultant who spoke at our recent leadership retreat. I've spent the last hour exploring the app with my team, and I'm genuinely impressed by the thoughtful approach to culturally responsive wellness. I had to read it 3 times before my brain accepted that this was real. Dr. Aisha Williams. I remembered her now, a powerhouse consultant I'd followed on Twitter for years. She'd tweeted about Rooted the week before, calling it the app Black women in corporate spaces have been waiting for. The tweet had gotten 847 retweets and landed in feeds I never could have reached on my own. But it wasn't just the validation that made my hands shake as I read Dr. Tanaka's email. It was the recognition that this moment had been building for months, invisible to everyone except the women who needed what I'd built. We would love to discuss potentially integrating Rooted into our employee wellness offerings. Would you be available for a call this week? I screenshot the email and sent it to exactly one person, Dr. Patricia Williams, my therapist. Her response came back in minutes. The universe has a sense of humor and a sense of justice. Call me after you respond. I called Dr. Tanaka that afternoon. Her voice was warm but professional, the kind of person who asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to the answers. She explained that Peterson Ventures was piloting a comprehensive wellness program for their portfolio companies, particularly focused on supporting employees from underrepresented backgrounds who faced unique stressors in predominantly white corporate environments. We've tried several existing platforms, she said, but they all feel generic. Like they were designed by people who've never experienced microaggressions or imposter syndrome tied to their identity. Your app is different. Different. The word I'd been afraid of my entire career was suddenly my superpower. Rooted speaks to something specific, I told her. It's not wellness despite being Black in corporate America. It's wellness because of it. It acknowledges that our stress isn't just individual, it's systemic.
Exactly, she said.
Which is why I'd like you to present to our CEO, Amanda Chen, next month. She's been pushing for more authentic approaches to employee mental health. Amanda Chen, Malik's boss. The woman he quoted in dinner conversations about market disruption and strategic innovation. The CEO who'd built Peterson Ventures into one of the most influential VC firms in the country.
And she wanted to hear about my app.
Not through Malik. Not through some connection he'd facilitated. Through the work itself. After I hung up, I sat in my empty apartment, still furniture sparse from all the selling, and felt something shift inside my chest. This wasn't just about business success or proving Malik wrong. This was about something deeper. Rooted represented a new kind of power, not the loud, aggressive dominance that the venture capital world worshipped, not the performative diversity that corporations used as marketing material. This was power that grew in silence, roots extending deep before anyone noticed the tree. I thought about my grandmother, who'd cleaned white women's houses to put my grandfather through night school. About my mother, who'd been the only Black teacher in her elementary school for 15 years, smiling through parent conferences where people questioned whether she was qualified to teach their children. About every Black woman who'd ever had to be twice as good for half the recognition. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. I spent that evening writing in my journal, my handwriting fierce and sprawling across the pages. They want us to believe that success means assimilation, that we have to strip away everything that makes us different to fit into their boardrooms and corner offices. But what if our difference is our strength? What if the very things they see as limitations, our sensitivity, our community-mindedness, our refusal to leave people behind, are actually our superpowers? Rooted exists because I refuse to make myself smaller. Because I chose to build something for us, by us, instead of begging for seats at tables that were never meant to hold us anyway. This is what revolution looks like in 2024. Not protests or manifestos, but products. Not asking for permission, but creating solutions. Not waiting for them to see our value, but building our own systems of worth. A week later, Amanda Chin emailed me directly. Not her assistant. Not through Dr. Tanaka. Amanda Chin, whose decisions moved millions of dollars and shaped entire industries, took time out of her schedule to write me a personal note. Jasmine, Keiko shared some preliminary information about Rooted, and I'm intrigued. I'd like to schedule a demo for early January. I'm particularly interested in how you've approached community building within the app and your thoughts on scaling culturally specific wellness solutions. Best, Amanda. Culturally specific wellness solutions. She got it. She understood that what I'd built was a niche. It was necessary. I printed the email and put it in my journal, right next to Brad's business card from that coffee shop meeting where he tried to convince me I needed Connor's credibility. Some receipts are worth keeping. Christmas dinner was still 5 days away, but I already knew how it would feel to look across that table at Malik. Not with anger or resentment, but with the quiet confidence that comes from building something real. Rooted wasn't just succeeding despite the system. It was creating a new system entirely. And that was the most revolutionary thing of all. Some trees grow in silence. Doesn't mean they're not forests. Back in Chicago, January snow falls past my window like confetti celebrating something only I can see. I'm curled up in my one remaining armchair, the velvet one I refuse to sell because it holds too many memories of breakthrough moments, with a cup of chamomile tea and my laptop balanced on my knees. It's been 3 weeks since Christmas dinner, and Malik hasn't called. Not once. No follow-up questions about the demo. No requests for details about Peterson Ventures. No attempts to insert himself into what I'm building. The silence from New York speaks louder than any conversation we could have. But Grandma Rose texts me every morning now. Simple messages. Proud of you, baby, and how's your tree growing today? She started calling Rooted my tree, which makes me smile every time. Yesterday, she sent a photo of the actual tree in her backyard, a massive oak that's been there since before I was born. Took 40 years to get this tall, she wrote. But look at those roots. The demo with Amanda Chun is scheduled for next Friday. I've rehearsed my presentation 17 times, not because I'm nervous about the technology. Rooted runs beautifully now, but because I want to honor what this moment represents. This isn't just a business pitch. It's proof of concept for a different way of building, a different way of succeeding. My phone buzzes with notifications throughout the day. User feedback, new signups, messages from women sharing how the app helped them navigate difficult conversations at work or find peace during lunch breaks. Each ping is validation, but not the kind I used to crave. This validation comes from impact, not applause. I still haven't updated my LinkedIn profile. It still says UX designer at Chicago Tech Solutions, a digital ghost of who I used to be. Colleagues from my old job occasionally like my sparse posts, probably wondering why I disappeared from the networking circuit. A few have reached out directly, fishing for information about what I'm doing now. I respond politely, but vaguely. Not because I'm ashamed of Rooted, but because I've learned the difference between privacy and secrecy. Privacy protects what matters. Secrecy stems from shame. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm just selective about where I invest my energy. The press hasn't found the story yet. No TechCrunch articles about former corporate employee builds breakthrough wellness app. No features in Fast Company about diversity in entrepreneurship. And that's fine. The women who need Rooted are finding it through whisper networks and group chats, the same way we've always shared survival strategies. Organic growth built on genuine need feels more sustainable than viral moments built on hot takes and hashtags. The app has 3,200 active users now, growing by about 50 new signups daily. Not unicorn numbers, but real people leading real lives who find real value in what I've created. Dr. Patricia Williams asks during our session this week if I feel vindicated. That's the wrong word, I tell her, settling into her familiar armchair that's become a symbol of safe spaces in my life. Vindication implies I was wronged, and now I'm proven right. This feels bigger than that. How so? I'm not building Rooted to prove anything to anyone. I'm building it because it needs to exist. The validation is nice, but it was never the point. She nods, making that note-taking sound that means I've said something worth remembering. What was the point? I think about this while watching snow accumulate on her office window. Legacy. I finally say, but not the kind Malik chases. Not stock prices or Forbes lists or corner offices. Legacy in the lives that change because something you built made space for healing. That evening, I video call my parents. Dad's in his recliner, scrolling through his tablet. Mom's folding laundry that she brings to the living room so she can multitask during our conversations. It's beautifully ordinary. How's the app going, baby? Mom asks, shaking out one of Dad's work shirts. Growing steadily. The demo with Peterson Ventures is next week. That's Malik's company, right? Dad looks up from his tablet. It is. You nervous about that? I consider the question. A few months ago, the answer would have been yes. Nervous about family dynamics, about proving myself, about what Malik would think or say.
Now?
No. I realize as I say it. I'm excited. This is exactly where Rooted is supposed to be. After we hang up, I open my journal and write. I used to think success meant being loud enough that people couldn't ignore you. Getting the biggest title, the highest salary, the most impressive LinkedIn profile. Fighting for seats at tables where people questioned whether you belonged. But some of the most powerful trees in the forest grow quietly for decades before anyone notices their canopy. Their strength comes from roots that run deep, not branches that reach high. Rooted is my forest. Every woman who uses it, every moment of peace it provides, every breath it helps someone take before walking into a hostile meeting, those are the roots. They're spreading underground, connecting to other roots, creating networks of support that don't need anyone's permission to exist. I don't owe anyone loud. I don't owe anyone performance or publicity or proof. I owe myself authenticity. I owe my community solutions. I owe the little girl who dreamed of building something meaningful the courage to keep building, even when no one's watching. Especially when no one's watching. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't success that everyone can see. It's success that changes everything, quietly, until the world looks around one day and realizes it's been transformed. Some revolutions happen in boardrooms. Others happen one mindful breath at a time. Outside, the snow continues to fall, blanketing Chicago in possibility. And somewhere in the city, in cities across the country, women are opening an app one built and finding a moment of peace in their chaotic days. That's legacy enough for me.